Have you ever seen a product, an idea, or a trend just explode out of nowhere? One day, nobody's heard of it, and the next, it's absolutely everywhere. Well, today we're digging into exactly how that happens. We're breaking down the big ideas from Malcolm Gladwell's classic, The Tipping Point, to see how the smallest changes can trigger the biggest movements. And it all starts with a fantastic little mystery. So back in the mid-90s, you had this shoe brand, Hush Puppies. Let's be honest, they were not cool at all. They were selling maybe 30,000 pairs a year. Then, suddenly, boom, sales shot up to 2 million pairs just a couple of years later. And here's the kicker. The company itself had absolutely nothing to do with it. So what on earth happened? How does an old school shoe or a new piece of tech or even a citywide crime wave suddenly reach this invisible line and then just spread like an epidemic? That is the million-dollar question we are going to unpack right now. So here's our roadmap. First, we're going to nail down what a tipping point actually is. Then, we'll get into the 3 big rules that make them happen: the law of the few, something called the stickiness factor, and the power of contact. And then, we'll wrap it all up. All right, let's dive into part 1. What is a tipping point? You can think of it as the moment of critical mass. The best way to think about it is like a virus, right? An idea can be floating around for a long, long time, not really doing much. But then, it hits this threshold, this critical mass, and all of a sudden, it's unstoppable. It's everywhere. That single moment of ignition, that's the tipping point. Fax machines are a perfect example. For years, they kind of just chugged along with pretty boring sales. And then look at 1987. The graph just goes vertical. Why? Because just enough people finally owned one that it became essential for everyone else to get one too. The value of the network tipped, and bam, the fax machine became a must-have overnight. Okay, section 2, the law of the few. So how does an idea actually get to that tipping point? Well, you might think you need to tell everyone, but this first rule says no, that's not it at all. It's actually about reaching a very small and very specific group of people. You've probably bumped into the 80-20 principle before, right? The idea that in a lot of situations, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Well, Gladwell says that when it comes to ideas spreading, it's even more extreme than that. A tiny, tiny fraction of people are responsible for the vast majority of the spread. So how are they? Well, first you have the connectors. These are the people who just seem to know everybody. But their real superpower isn't their close friends. It's their massive network of acquaintances, what sociologists call weak ties. They act like social hubs, connecting all these different worlds and allowing an idea to jump from one group to another. That's absolutely vital for something to go viral. Next up, you've got the salesmen. Now, these aren't necessarily people who sell cars for a living. They are just masters of persuasion. They have this charisma, this energy. They get you excited and on board with an idea, and you don't even realize it's happening. Their belief is just that infectious. And finally, we have the Mavens. These are the info geeks. You know, the friend you text when you're about to buy a new laptop or TV because they've done all the research. They love learning, but more importantly, they love sharing what they know to help other people. And because they're not trying to sell you anything, their recommendation carries enormous weight. It's like a trusted stamp of approval. Okay, part 3, the stickiness factor. So let's say you have the perfect messengers lined up. That's great. But what about the message itself? Well, for an idea to really take off, it has to be memorable. It needs to stick. Stickiness is basically that special quality that makes a message stay with you. We're bombarded with information all day long, so to cut through all that noise, an idea needs a hook. And often, that hook comes from a really small, simple, but brilliant tweak to the way it's presented. This old slogan for Winston cigarettes is a perfect example. Like a cigarette should. Grammatically, that's just wrong. It's supposed to be as a cigarette should. But that tiny, deliberate mistake is exactly what made it so brilliant. It was different, it was a little rebellious, and it was super easy to remember. It stuck. Or look at Sesame Street. When the show first started, they kept the scenes with the humans separate from the scenes with the Muppets. But the creators noticed that whenever the humans were on screen, kids got bored and tuned out. So they tried one simple, tiny change. They put the Muppets and the humans on the street together, interacting. And just like that, the show became incredibly sticky. Kids were completely captivated. Part 4, the power of context. We've got the right people and a sticky message. But there is one final crucial piece to this puzzle. And honestly, it might be the most powerful of all. the environment. This rule says that our immediate surroundings have a massive impact on our behavior, way more than we think. There's this famous study that shows this perfectly. Researchers had a group of seminary students, people studying to be priests, walk across campus to give a talk. Along the way, they passed a person who was clearly in distress. Now here's the twist. Some students were told they had plenty of time. Others were told they were running late. The result? Of the students who weren't in a hurry, 63% stopped to help. Of those in a rush, only 10%. Their moral character didn't change, just the context of being in a hurry.
Now, think about that in the real world. In the early 1990s, New York City was in the middle of a serious crime epidemic, and the environment was screaming disorder. Graffiti was on every single subway car. People jumped the turnstiles without paying, all the time. The context sent a clear signal. Anything goes here, no one's in control.
So the city decided to try a radical experiment based on this power of context idea. Instead of focusing only on major crimes, they went to war on the little things. They started cleaning the graffiti off every subway car every single night. They started arresting people just for not paying the fare. And the result was absolutely incredible. By changing the context, by fixing the broken windows and cleaning up the graffiti, they sent a powerful new message that order was being restored. And almost overnight, the rates for serious violent crimes started to plummet. They tipped the crime epidemic backwards. All right, Section 5. Let's put this all together and recap those 3 big rules. It really boils down to this 3-part formula. First, the law of the few says you need the right people, connectors, mavens, and salesmen, to get the word out. Second, the stickiness factor says the message itself has to be simple and memorable. And third, the power of context says the time and place have to be right for the idea to flourish. Get those 3 things right, and you can start an epidemic. You know, this isn't just some interesting theory. It's a practical blueprint for how change happens, which leads to one last question for you to think about. What idea, what product, what positive change in your world is just waiting for the right nudge to finally tip?